what happens when you finish lapping and you have to return to normal life? While most of you are just in the planning stages or you're out enjoying the country, you may not want to hear about the realities of returning to your old life. But the truth is, you actually don't have to return to your old life at all. Sure, you might need to move out of your home on wheels to the more non-movable variety, but your big lap might change your perspective on what you want out of life completely. In this episode of Campfire Conversations, I speak to Matesse and Paul from Forward Adventures, where we discuss what they learned after a year on the road and what life looks like after their big lap. Hey Big Lap community, and welcome to another episode of Campfire Convos. Today I'm here with Paul and Matesse from Forward Adventures. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey,
Hi, we're good, thank you.
Awesome. Now this is going to be a little bit of a different interview because, like I told you before we sort of jumped on, a lot of the interviews we do are with people either getting excited about starting their big lap or currently on their big lap, currently traveling, those kinds of things. But your travels have come to an end, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah, mostly in terms of our gap year, they have. We'll continue to travel forever, but our big trip is summed up.
Was it much? Yeah, about 3 months we've landed and now trying to find a new life in a new state. So navigating all of that's been interesting.
A new adventure.
Absolutely. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I firstly just want to sort of go into, take us back to the start. Why did you decide that you were going to do a gap year big lap?
That's me. So the backpack story is that's in about 2011, was it 11, 12? Yeah, thereabouts. We did another gap year. We actually,
our gap year.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to travel for 12 months internationally. So that was BC,
Before kids,
before children.
I thought it was before Corona.
It's could be a lot of these things. Yeah, so we traveled for a whole year and did like 50 countries and basically backpacked it sort of thing. Which was fantastic, and then when we came home and we settled back into sort of regular life. We bought a house, and sort of soon after that, like probably about a year after that, we just decided that we need to start planning our next gap year adventure, I suppose. So after our sort of first son was born, and then we just sort of cemented the idea even more, and we just started planning at that stage to sort of
basically from pregnancy. We knew, okay, so he was going to be hitting prep in 2021.
Yeah,
2020 had to be the year that was going to
have to be our year. So that's what we're going to work towards. So we saved and skimped and did all the things that we could do to make it sort of work. And
it was more or less 5 years in the planning. Every purchase for the house or the car or camping gear was with this gap year in mind.
Yeah.
So the caravan was a long several years worth of research, and then the towing vehicle as well,
and then customization and all sorts of stuff. So
everything.
we were pretty well planned. It wasn't so much of a knee-jerk thing. So
absolutely.
And I think that his sister also did a gap year. Oh, no, it was about 9 months, probably about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we've had that in the family, and there was always input saying, oh, when are you going to do yours? And well, prior to that, we had no concept of wanting to even do it.
Yeah. And that's nice to have that family support, isn't it? Because a lot of people sort of do their big lap and, they've got grandparents and people like that back home sort of missing them. So it's really nice that you had that sort of family, not only support, but kind of push to do it.
Yeah.
Look, understanding from where your thoughts are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've been campers. Like I've been camping and four-wheel driving my whole life, and since Matesse and I have been together, I've been dragging her into doing it as well. So we've sort of been fairly experienced. But this was our first caravan. We'd never owned a camper or towed a camper before, so that was pretty new.
Mm-hmm. So what setup did you decide to go on? What was your caravan and what was your towing vehicle?
So right from the start, probably like most people, I was pretty keen to want to have a Land Cruiser because the king of the road. Land Cruiser is amazing.
Yeah.
My dad had 3 Land Cruisers. It was in a 200 series Land Cruiser. My sister had a 100 series Land Cruiser. It was in the family. Unfortunately, what we were very cognizant of was that we didn't want to be eyeballs in debt with spending the sort of money that we were going to spend. We also were very keen to make sure that we kept our house and we weren't going to sell our house. So we only had a certain amount of savings. We only had a certain amount of budget, and that budget was...
Or our investment property at that time.
Yeah, or our investment property at the time, which we did end up selling anyway. But so we stuck with Toyota, but we couldn't afford to go up to even the Prado. So we went with the Toyota Fortuner, which was a pretty good compromise because it was a lot cheaper than the Prado, but had the same engine and it was a lot lighter. So it was really capable sort of off-road. I spent a lot of time and a lot of money modifying it, but I would have spent the same money, probably more money modifying a Prado or a Land Cruiser anyway. So I've been pretty happy with it. It's been really, really very good. It's overlooked and as a vehicle for this sort of thing, and it was actually very, very good. So I would encourage people to consider it. The camper that we went with is a lifestyle breakaway. It's a sort of like a 14-foot, I think it is, or 14.5-foot sort of hybrid, sort of pop-up type camper, which is off-road capable and sort of had some of the mod cons. It didn't have aircon, which we at a later stage somewhat retrofit.
For isolation.
Because it was stinking hot in isolation. But it really did us really, really very well. The biggest thing with it is that it was a camper, so it was compact. I drove into a underground Aldi car parks and were able to pick up shopping and do those sorts of things at any town, anywhere, right? So you're not limited to sort of go, I'm going to have to drop the van off and then we'll go into town and then we don't like the town and then you go back and then hook up. We didn't do any of that. We just went straight into towns.
We also
and
managed
cities.
to do some of the harder tracks.
Oh yeah, like we went down onto the old Telly track and we did, the Bloomfield track, and we did a whole bunch of things in it that we wouldn't have done in a bigger van. But the key benefit was that it was really customizable in terms of the way that we could set it up. So we could set up and be in bed in 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
But we could also fold it out with walls and, almost
full annex
quadruple the actual floor space and have a fully enclosed big area, within a sort of an hour and a half of setup. So it was really flexible in the way we could set it up, and some really fast, some really slow, but it did us really well.
We also did a lot of retrofitting to that, including like the kids kept growing. So we're like, oh, what bunk are we going to do that now? And kept having to increase the height of
one of the kids just
the cot sides.
Yeah.
He can pull himself up now.
He liked diving out of the bed. Yeah, kids like diving out of bed.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of people say they sort of start on their big lap and they have 2 problems. The first one is they've packed too much stuff and they ended up getting rid of it. And the other problem is they haven't accounted for X, Y, and Z, and then they start adding it. So what were the kind of things that you found that you either took too much of or got rid of or needed and didn't realize?
Needing is a different
wanting.
Yeah.
So when we left, I was a very avid campfire cooker. I'm like, we're cooking on campfire. I love a campfire. I got the chainsaw. I got like a barbecue plate from Hillbilly. It's like a swing out sort of barbecue type plates, and was very keen on that. We left,
and he had romantic notions of having campfires every night.
Yeah, like camp ovens and all that sort of shit. We had 3 months of like of total fire ban, absolute fire ban.
And national parks that you're not allowed to have any fires.
Yeah,
it's one thing that I would say to people is that if you're planning on staying in national parks and you are going to be touring for a whole year, it's likely you're not going to be like north of the tropic during that time, because it's just raining and horrible. You're going to be so if you're going to be south, you're going to be in those areas. You're not going to be able to have many fires. It's just a thing. It's either 40,000 degrees. You don't really want to be having fires,
And
or there's total fire
bans.
bans.
Wait to lug your firewood.
So
You're
like,
allowed to get your firewood.
so that we actually had continual stages of downsizing and changing that setup. So when we got to Adelaide from leaving Melbourne, we bought a Weber Q, and that was fantastic. We used it daily, just about. You know, it was the number one thing. Like, I don't like cooking on gas as a romantic idea, but as a practical, we've got a family, everyone needs to eat. Like it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. It was the better one that had a taller lid, so you could fit in roast, and it had a gauge, a temperature gauge. Yeah. So that was good.
So as soon as we could flog off all the camping camp cooking gear, which was so heavy.
So by the time we actually got up to Darwin, we still had a fire pit, like a steel, sort of cut out sort of fire pit that you put together. Gone. Yeah. Don't want that anymore, because just about every bloody campsite that we went to, there was fire pits anyway. Yeah. So
if you're allowed a fire pit,
there was a fire pit. So I'm like, more weight, get rid of it.
So the shower tent.
Oh yeah, so we had one of those sort of double room type setup shower tents, because there was no shower or toilet inside, and I always like the idea of being able to have the toilet in one and the shower in the other. Seems like a great idea. Those things are useless.
You're not the first person I've heard who says that.
Like sure, if you're in your backyard in the middle of a rainforest and there's no wind, fine, okay, maybe, but like basically the entire coastline of Australia is windy as shit, depending on which side you're on, and those things just go flat, and even if you're inside it and it's rattling around, no.
And it took longer to set that up in the caravan at some points.
Yeah.
Not that we needed to be off grid, because so many of the places, even free camping places, would have a toilet facility anyway.
Yeah.
Or some sort. We just go, bush. And so we hardly even used it. So then you upgraded to the
kick-ass sort of shower tent, which is a rip-off of a quick pitch one, but it's just like a car awning. You just zip it out, the arms sort of fold out, and then it drops down. Yeah. So we found that was way more useful, because it was outside the van, so it was storage space. We didn't have to pull stuff out in order to get it out. But also, even just like pulling up to like Mataranka Springs, like we could just pop it open and make it as a change room, and it took like 7 seconds to set up, and it takes like 15 seconds to pack up. So from that perspective, it became a lot more useful. Like we were saying, we didn't use the toilet all that much. We just didn't need to. Like there was only this gap in between where there was either a toilet, or we were so remote that it just made more sense to sort of go out into the bush sort of thing. So there was a little spot in between there where we needed to use the porta potty, but not all that
4
much.
4-day stays, but they were rare as well.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I keep telling friends who ask is that there are shops everywhere, and it felt like every town we went to, the first thing we'd go to, Bunnings. And all the places, we would be forever upgrading. Every week we're modifying something. The first few months, I reckon it was about 3 months before we got into a good groove of things are starting to work. And this is already having done a 6-week or 4-week practice run a year before. So we did Tasmania as a year before our actual gap year.
Yeah, in January.
A lap of that. Just
December,
to
January.
see
So
how the van shakedown sort of thing. And then we spent the year modifying the van to fix what we learnt from that. Meanwhile, the kids are growing even higher, different changes again. But we're constantly improving things. We had so many issues with the solar batteries. That seems to be an ongoing thing when you chat to other people. Yeah. So constant modifications. But again, to the point was, people don't have to try to get it perfect when they leave. It's equipment available around the country.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Whenever we go on holiday, so to speak, we pack everything because we're like, oh, we don't know what shops they're going to be. But literally, we're only going to, when we set off, we're only going to be 4 hours down the road from where we are currently.
Yeah. It's just because there's a difference, right, between a holiday and living on the road. Like there's a huge difference, right? So I don't think anyone is really all that prepared for that, to be honest. You've either got some people that are just so used to, even when they go on holidays, they don't take much. They just take a bit and they go to the shops every day anyway, which those people just have a tendency to get caught out. And then they're all like, yeah, we had to buy like a $10 loaf of bread at a service station, and we had to, whereas we were also in such a groove at home to not try and go to the shops every day or even every week. We tried to do like what Matesse does mostly, like a two weekly shop, and does a big shop, and then we load everything up, and then we're all good. And we tried to do that with the camper as well most of the time.
But I could only fit about a week's worth of food in, but then stockpile as well. So every time there was we were in a bigger town that had good supermarkets and an Aldi, I'd stockpile on all of those. So we probably weren't doing good on weight fuel economy, but it was certainly better than trying to buy, I don't know, anything in a tiny little back of nowhere shop where, I don't know, a can of fruit would be $6.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you did your sort of when you say gap year, I'm assuming that means you saved up and you didn't work on the road. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. And so during your big lab, you were pretty much in COVID for the whole time. So were you affected by lockdowns?
Oh, yeah. So if you look at our route across Australia, it's a bit zigzaggy, but we started to go west first, and then we hit Perth. So we'd already been on the road for 3.5 months-ish.
The reason why we went that way was because most of the country was on fire at the time, right? So New South Wales, there was fires everywhere. So we were tossing up even right to the last moment. Like, are we going to go west or are we going to go north? It's like, and because we were leaving in December, which was obviously sort of smack bang in the middle of summer, it was going to be hot either which way we went, but it was all more cognizant of the top end and which way we wanted to do the top end, and how was it, further to go around and get there via the west coast or via the east coast. But the fires made the decision for us, so we just went, okay, well we'll go east, and that's the direction we started heading. We still ran into fires, we still ran into some floods and a few bits and pieces, but by the time we actually got to Perth, which was in March, so it was obviously becoming more real at that time, or it was becoming more of a headline. So even when we were in Adelaide around sort of Christmas time and January time, it was there, it was in the news, it started to
in China.
It started to become a thing. And we were watching it and hearing about it, but not thinking it was going to turn into the beast that it did. But the crux, or I suppose the tipping point for us, where we suddenly felt hugely affected by it, was my folks live in just outside of Noosa, and they've got a hybrid camper as well, and they were actually going to drive across the country, and they were going to meet us in Geraldton in WA, and then we were going to do that whole sort of west coast together
over 6 weeks.
So they were about to leave, or going to be leaving in about a week's time, and then the Queensland border closed, and then like the New South Wales border was looking like it was going to close to South Australia, and then Victoria.
And then we had other friends who were meeting us from Melbourne.
And so we
like, oh, this is getting real.
We'd sort of gone,
where are we going to bunker down?
This is kind of turning out to be a little bit crap. Like, no one can come over here. The West Coast is amazing, but at the same time, we don't really want to be locked down over here either. And we don't, so it went from having the discussion with my folks about them leaving and getting there, within about 4 hours, we were packing up to scoot across the country. So then within 5 days from that point, we
were thinking, in the news, no one knew what was going on, that there were news reports every hour. I was glued to the phone for the ABC updates. And first we thought, maybe this will blow over in 2 weeks' time, sort of thing. Let's just find a nice seaside town but maybe if it goes for longer, there'll be jobs like fruit picking jobs or something like that in a daycare centre. That we can do that if it goes for a bit longer. And then as soon as ScoMo said you could be locked down for 6 months, that was it. We
were like,
gone.
nope, camper, nope,
No,
6 months, nope.
So we did epic amounts of driving to try to get back over the Nullarbor in 5 days. And we were trying to get, because we have no proof of address sort of thing.
Of course, yeah.
There was, we were trying to get his sister to do stat decks saying that we were going to move into the parents' house in Queensland.
Yeah.
So that was to do quarantine there. And we were caught up at the Ceduna border crossing because, of course,
we got jagged up by it. So I mean, there was, because the way that we were traveling, which
borders were closing as we were getting through.
Yeah. So as we were going, so the other thing too was there was a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
So there was an awful lot of,
no one knew what was going
on. And look, to be honest, it was understandable because there was quite a lot of hysteria, and there was a lot, as we were leaving WA, residents were, and caravan parks were sort of starting to close, and residents of small towns were actually starting to get very scared. And anyone that was seen as being an outsider, irrespective of if you were from Victoria or South Australia or wherever, you were seen as being like someone that shouldn't be there. So people were just starting to get a bit freaked out by it. So there were people that were, abused and told to get out, and we know a couple who pulled into a service station with Victorian number plates, and they were told, no, you can't, you guys need to go home, you can't get fuel here. So they wouldn't sell them fuel, and they were like, we're trying to go home, but we need fuel. And they're like, yeah, no, you can't, we need to reserve this for the local community.
Terrible.
Like, okay. Anyway, so they just went down the road.
They just went down the road to another service. So it's a very strange time. So you can understand why that was a bit crazy. But the problem is that the so-called border closures, well, not border closures. It wasn't Syria. There wasn't tanks on the border. It was basically.
Although we've been through that too in our life.
The odd military coup. It's the thing that we do. We seem to be running into these things. So when we got to the border, like we were the South Australia WA border, we thought, cool, we'll get across the border. And we'd been driving for, I don't know, the night that we left, we left at like 10 o'clock at night and drove for about 4 hours, and then stopped. And then the next day we probably put in about, I don't know, 12 hours or something, 10 or 12 hours. And we thought, cool, we've gotten over the border. It's all good. But no, because the border control for WA, South Australia is in Ceduna. It's not at the border, which is another number of hours,
4 hours,
3 hours, something. So then the next morning when we got there and we got to the border, they were like, oh yeah, the border, you've got to have the declaration closing. The border is closed. And we're like, oh, that's a shame. But the thing is the border wasn't closed. It wasn't closed. It was basically like, if you're transiting, like the way that this country is, and this is why it's funny recently, there's only a few major arterials. Sorry, my mum's leaving. There's only a few major arterials, like the Stewart Highway, the sort of Nullarbor, and some of these roads. And if they get closed off, those are the only ways you can get around this country, really. I mean, other than going a bit off the beaten track. So they know that people needed to transit, right? So we got to the border. The cop was really nice. We're like, we're going to Queensland. He's like, no worries. You need to just transit through. And
go as quick as you can. Masks on at the supermarket and the fuel station.
Don't stop and linger. Like, just if you need to stop for fuel and rest and
but you will now actually have to quarantine in Queensland.
Which you knew you were going to have to anyway, right? Like the virus was spreading. We were traveling through WA, South Australia, New South Wales, and Queensland in 5 days. It would be irresponsible not to like quarantine anyway. So, like, it wasn't a big deal, and everyone was freaking out about it and going, "Oh, we'll sneak you across the border in New South Wales," and we're like,
yeah, exactly. So you quarantined for a little while, and then did you stay in one place before you set off again? Like, what was the rest of your journey like?
Yeah, so we were quarantined in Noosa, like pretty nice place to quarantine.
Sounds
really.
terrible.
Like this is their backyard.
Yeah, right.
The in-laws, which was amazing because it's a big block and you don't see any neighbours, and a 5-minute walk to the letterbox and back was pretty much all we were allowed to, because you're not allowed to leave the property.
Yeah.
That was your exercise for the day. And it just felt like a resort sort of holiday. So that was our 2 weeks of lockdown. At the same point, so was the rest of the country. So it wasn't that bad. But then we just kept keeping an eye on what the borders restrictions were for Queensland. And they were initially talking about you're only allowed to move 250 kilometres. So that was by June, I think. So we ended up being in Noosa for just shy of 3 months.
Yeah, so it's about 2.5 months.
As soon as they actually opened up the restrictions of travel limits a week or so earlier, and we weren't even ready for that. It's like, but we planned to go here and here and here instead. And so then we were like, we're off. We're going to go north now. Yeah. Because of the timing and the weather.
Yeah, because the borders were still closed, but Queensland interstate travel was opening up. So when they opened that up, pretty successive sort of time. So it went from being, you can go 180 k's or something from your home location. So my parents and I, we planned a trip that was within that range, and then by the time it came around that we were going to do that, then pretty much the next week it opened up like I think 250 k's or something, and then by the time that even came about, it was you could travel within the state as long as it was outside of Aboriginal and those sorts of communities. But then essentially we got right to the edge of that anyway, so we got right up to Cairns, and
there was talk about the so Cape York then would have been our next mission. So we were pretty much going slowly. There was talk of it opening up again, I don't know, 10th of July, something like that.
Oh, that was June.
July.
Oh, July. Whatever.
Anyway.
It's one of the great things about living on the road.
That's it.
Times and days become unnecessary things to recall.
So we're messaging the community and we're saying, so how's the border looking? Oh, they're having a meeting this week.
And I was talking directly with the council, so the actual Cooktown Shire Council. So that was good. I actually got a bit of an inside that it was opening before it was. So we sort of, or before it did, or before it was released to the press. So we were kind of like at the gates.
Insider information.
Sitting in the Daintree just waiting for just north of that to open up.
It was all these Aboriginal communities just see Victorians driving in on the first day. And we were like, hey! Where's the pub?
So, and we managed to do Cape York, and we're up there with the famous sign with no one else around. So, so many places that we were going. We kept thinking, it's a COVID year, there'll be so much lockdown, we won't be able to get things. I mean, Mossman Gorge was closed.
But that was closed because of renovations or something anyway. It wasn't.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was one of the very few things that we missed out on
The
whole year.
You're right.
Other than that, a few ranger guided tours and maybe Kakadu.
There was a few things that were probably more sort of community-based things that we weren't able to do, that weren't running or that were closed or that were sort of restrictions. There was Aboriginal sort of communities and getting into those communities and experiencing some of the cultural side of things it just wasn't something we pressed. It wasn't something we actively tried to really sort of see if it was going on too much anyway, because a lot of it was really shut down. And it just didn't seem responsible to go into those places anyway. So we did try and avoid that a bit.
But on the flip side, we had national parks all to ourselves. Waterfalls, swimming holes, again, all to ourselves without the swathes of tourists.
The biggest thing too, I think, was like anything when you do these sorts of trips, you want freedom. That's why everyone's doing it. And an interesting thing was that
we didn't have to book caravan parks even.
Well, so that's what I was getting to is that we didn't have to book. So there was no time restriction to be in a certain place because we had to book it months ahead. Like we had none of that, which was the most glorious freedom. It was it didn't matter. We could call ahead to any place and just say, have you got space for the night? And they're like, yeah, you've got like 300
of course.
sites you can choose. So yeah, I mean, I think that was just really the number one, like, and
which is going to be so different for everybody.
I just feel sorry for
100%.
people now, like, and I have to tell people, like, seriously,
don't base our year on what you're going to
do. Like, seriously, get booking, like, book stuff. And my opinion of it is, there's so many places that you can book that are cheap. Just book them.
Do it.
Even if you don't make it, just book them. And if you know you're not going to make it, please call them and cancel it. At least,
especially if it's a national park.
Like, it's
just
a national park.
It's $6. We were caught out on that one. The whole national park was booked out. No one was there.
Yeah, so that was one thing that did catch us up a little bit. Was, I think what happens is that there was bookings at national parks, but then national parks reduced their numbers by stupid amounts. So like you there'd be a campsite that might hold 1,000 people, and they'll be like, yeah, well, we can only restrict it to 20 people.
Yeah. Okay.
So they would keep the bookings that they had for the sites that they were opening. So you might have like only 5 sites out of like 50 that were open, but they're all booked, and no one would show up because all the borders were closed, and it was all like interstate and international tourists. So it was just poorly done.
Yeah.
But look, you just throw off a few ropes and
and I think
camp there anyway.
It was something you were sort of mentioning before about traveling through, Aboriginal lands and things like that. It's all about being a responsible traveler at all stages, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And look, you're sort of everyone, and I think this is sort of
so much is private land too, and people just think, oh yeah, we'll just pull up on the side of the road here, but that's actually someone's driveway technically. They might not, I don't know how long they'll pass through it, but so when people say, oh, I'm going to free camp across the country and do it really cheap, it's actually really hard to find free camps on public land.
It's sort of a two-sided coin. There's a lot of places where it's wide open spaces, and it's fine for you to camp in some of those places, but there's a lot of places that aren't. And people have this thing about, oh, we're just going to free camp our way, and you go into like Port Douglas. There's no free camping in Port Douglas. Like people go, oh, we'll just camp in the car park near the programs. No, don't do that. Like all that does is it makes towns get pissy with travelers. So it's just one of those things. Like I think we expected to free camp more than what we did.
Definitely did for budget wise.
So it's just one of those things. And also like national parks, the prices of national parks are so varied. They change in every state and different levels in every state. And also the states just love to jack up the prices. Like WA's prices have like nearly tripled in like 10 years. So
and with the borders opening and everybody rushing over that side, I imagine it's only going to get worse over there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Now, Matesse, you mentioned your budget just then, wanting to free camp for your budget. Did you set yourselves a weekly or a monthly budget for when you went? And a second part of that question, did you stick to it?
I'm a spreadsheet queen.
Love it.
I'm the spender. She's the not spender.
This just reminds me of my relationship with my husband.
So, going back 5 years, we kind of knew we needed to save a lot of money. And we used our daily or our pre-trip sort of grocery budget to know, because our normal life sticks to a budget, so it wasn't too difficult to move that on road life. But then you forget, oh wow, daycare must actually feed your kids a lot. So I didn't allow for how much food they would actually consume when they're on the road, and in the car constantly just wanting to
snacks.
So
and they're little boys, right? They're outside a lot, and they burn a lot of energy, and as soon as they start to get what is it, like an association with being in the car and eating. So they get out of the car and we try and make lunch for them or dinner, and it's just impossible to get it into them. They just don't want to eat it. They just want to run around and do stupid things. But as soon as they get into the car, no matter how short the journey, I'm hungry. So, that happens.
Is that another tip there? Snack box.
Yeah, we
Oh, yeah.
had
The snack esky.
boxes.
Snack esky.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
my
Snack
morning
esky.
routine was just prepping the day's worth of snacks. So that's
Yeah,
cutting
right.
fruit. I baked something once a week to make it trying to. Anyway, back to the budget. So we had a strict budget for groceries. We had for fuel. Actually, fuel was a winner, given that the price dropped for fuel. I don't know if
yeah.
it's COVID related. So it went from $1.50.
It was definitely COVID related.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, supply and demand. It went from $1.50 to maybe $1.05.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And the
I
thing
was
is-
up so much on fuel.
So even though I
then-
think we're about 5,000 Ks or 5 or 6,000 Ks over what we thought we were going to do.
Yeah, we did 47,000 kilometers over the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we thought we would do about 40. So that was mostly because we obviously had to burn back across the country. If we hadn't have done that, I think we probably came in just about right. But I think I think we thought we would average in terms of fuel price, including some $2 stuff and some $1.20 stuff, around
$1.70.
$70, I think is what we sort of
We did on
budgeted
average.
for the 40,000 Ks. And I think the average was like $1.20.
You're right.
We ended up.
So that was a COVID win.
Yeah.
So fuel, we had a strict fuel budget. The big one was the contingency. That was originally 10%, but due to a bit of a tax debt, work out your childcare subsidies
Yes.
first. That ate that a little bit, but we blew so much of that because we had to replace solar panels, batteries. Nothing really hardcore broke on our setup.
Well, lots of things broke, but I got them. I was fastidious with checking.
Yeah.
So
Before they broke bad.
Things were wearing badly, or things were about to break, and before a wheel came off, I had it repaired, or we had things fixed and checked over regularly. So it is one of those things that unfortunately, you've just stuff breaks, and I mean the everyone I met had some form of problem. Like to think you're not going to have problems, and it is just crazy. If you're buying a secondhand van, you're buying a secondhand car, get it seriously well checked out, and especially if you're going to do any off-road with a van, just put new suspension in it, put new bearings in it, get new brake shoes put on it. Just doesn't matter how old they are or how recently they were serviced or how good someone says they were, just put new ones in. It's just
and keep spares.
New, good quality, either Australian made or decent made type gear, and you will thank me for it.
Absolutely. And I'll do a little bit of a shameless plug here. If you've got the Big Black Bible, you can go to Jack's Tires and Auto and actually get your free vehicle inspection on your car and your van. So there you go. Hot tip for you there. So let's go back to your budget. In terms of like the overall budget, were you over or were you under, considering all those things we've just...
We were over by, I can't remember now, it's either $2,000 or $4,000. So
that's not bad
epic.
over the course of a year, is it?
Not epic.
Yeah.
And off the back of that, we were originally supposed to be moving back to Melbourne, but there's a COVID thing. Our tenant pulled the plug on it, so we had to rent out our house halfway through. So that meant another 1 year that we couldn't get back into our house.
Right.
So that was kind of another reason why we went, let's just move
move
somewhere
to
else.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
The house is already packed up. All of our stuff is in storage. We don't have jobs to go back to.
Yeah.
Let's just give it a shot and see what happens.
So you're back in Noosa now?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Nice.
Noosa hinterland.
It's the sweat.
Yeah.
But so one thing that I'll point out that we were cognizant of right from when we were deciding on what to do, and this is some people do this sort of differently, so I'll just sort of point it out. So when we were deciding on our car and we were deciding on our van, it's so easy at that point in time to only think about your gap year, the year, and what you're going to do. And so many people that we met on the road had spent so much money on their cars, sold houses, sold their van, got these huge vans and these, big, sort of 4-wheel drives and that sort of stuff. I'm like, what are you going to do when go home? Like, are you going to go home? They're like, oh, we don't really know. We'll just sort of sort it out when we get there. And look, now is sort of a bit of a different time. It's a weird time for selling things secondhand. But we were just like, no, we want to live with this stuff for many years, and we don't want to have like a 35-foot bloody van sitting in the driveway. It's not necessary. But that's why we went with a smaller camper, that even as the kids grow, we can just boot them out and actually reconvert their bunks to a bench and still continue to use it for many years. And the car was also not a giant sort of 200 series or 79 series or anything like that. Like Matesse I can pull all the crap off it mostly, and Matesse can take it down to the shops and do the shopping and live with it day to day. We were really sort of wanted to make sure that it was something that we're not just going to pile a whole bunch of money into and then not continue to get benefit and use out of it going forward. So I think that's a big trick. So when we're spending money repairing things, and I found that people just go, oh, we'll just do a hack job just to get it through the next couple of months. I'm like, well, I didn't want to do that. Like, if we were going to spend money on repairing it, it was going to be properly done so that we could, have the longevity of the ownership.
Absolutely.
And then as far as coming to the end or planning to come to the end of the trip, I'm a follower of the Barefoot Investor. So got the buckets sorted out, finance buckets, but also we had to find new jobs when we came home. So maybe we need a buffer zone of living expenses to have, so we piled together an additional 3 months of living expenses to have in case we didn't both get jobs when we got home.
Yeah.
So that included things back to school, swimming lessons.
Absolutely.
Life does go on after you travel.
That's exactly
unusual,
it.
but it does.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people wouldn't really consider. They're so excited about budgeting for their big lap. Then, what happens when they do get back? It's for most people, we don't step back into a job. We don't step back into our house that we're already paying the bills for.
The budget doesn't finish when you put in your driveway.
You don't just kick your thongs and singlet off, shirt and suit back on and go back to work. It doesn't
Absolutely.
Really
So let's talk about life now. You've finished your gap year. Firstly, was it a hard transition to go from living this life of freedom to having to put your work clothes back on and get to work?
Yes. Oh, no, I've had many stages of anxiety. But I am such a planner. I was doing job ads and job interviews before we even got into Queensland.
And I wasn't, because I was still on holiday.
And did that stress you out, Matesse?
Anyway,
someone needed to get a job though, so
I managed to land a job that started on the 1st of February. We landed in Noosa on the 10th of December. So by the time we'd finished the Christmas crazy holiday period, I was then gearing up to not only try to work out, because we didn't have a primary school to go to, then searching schools in the area, daycare centres in the area. Oh my God, what do I put in lunch boxes? How do I prep that for a healthy thing? And then trying to work out how to work 4 days a week as well. Previously I'd work 3 days a week, transitioning to finishing up 4 days a week, but then how do you juggle everything in? And then Royce being in prep, I remember him transitioning into prep was difficult for him because he was too sort of scared and intimidated by the playground. So his primary school has 4 classes of 25 little preppies in it. And at lunchtime, they're all on the playground in one go. And he's
just spent a year traveling with maybe one other kid in every playground in the entire country. So
I don't want to go to the playground. It's too scary and too noisy. So that was hard for him. And then we don't know anyone here. He didn't know any of the kids. So trying to organise play dates for them, but also for us to meet other parents here. So there's been a lot going on. And I'm now commuting. We had to fly back to Melbourne to get our other car and clothes that were just camping
And
clothes.
she says, I don't want to drive it back. So look,
Someone has to look after the kids.
so I mean, we
there
had
you
a bit of an unusual transition, I suppose, because
Yeah.
we decided that at the end of a trip that we'd also move states,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
a little bit different. But I think,
And we've bunked in with the in-laws to work that out until we get out.
yeah, and I think that's probably something that I would, I suppose, advise is that
Yeah.
if you are going to rent out your house and then head off, I would suggest that you should leave earlier than you were sort of expected and rent your house out and come back and have it rented out for like 2 years, or have it as an 18-month lease if you're planning on coming back to your house. Because what will happen is that if you leave your rent right to finish when you get back, basically your income that you have from the rent will finish. So you're just going to put yourself into this pinch point of going, so we need to come back, get back into our regular lives. We now have no income. We've got to move back into our own house, and we've got to find jobs, and we've got to get kids back into school. And you got to also just park your van at a friend's house, at a mum and dad's house for a couple of months before the lease finishes. And
Yeah, that's
then
good too.
like you can at least try and set your life back up in terms of
Slowly.
people movement, and then move back into your house, and you'll already be sort of on your way. Don't like let, because that's what we were basically doing. We were like, we're going to leave in December, and we're going to kick people out in December and come back in December to a vacant house. Man, that would have been stressful.
Yeah.
So
No income coming in. We
up,
had the buffer 3 months.
we had a buffer, so we knew that there was going to be a buffer, but it's still a pressure pot, right? You're sort of forcing yourself into a pressure pot.
Yeah.
So at least if you had have come back and gone, you know what, I don't want to live in this state anymore. I don't want to go back to work. I want to keep traveling. I want to do whatever. Just renew your lease, and then you've made the decision. You can just keep going. If you've booted people out and you start to move back in, you're committed. So
absolutely, that's great advice. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to ask, what's the next adventure for you guys?
Just trying to sort out life here. Man.
This is currently our adventure, I suppose. It's a very different adventure because I've started my own business as well. So I've never done that before, never set up.
Which has just been an idea in the last month.
Oh yeah, last couple of months. Well, yeah, it was. I suppose that's what traveling as well. Like gives you a little bit of a different perspective. It allows you to reflect a bit more on how you've lived your life and maybe what you want to do with it going forward. So my perspective was I was working sort of around 45 to 50 hours a week. And then I had another 12 hours on top of that of commute per week. So it was an hour and a half each way to my job. And my youngest son's first 2 words were "bye, daddy," so which was just like a bit of a like, I can imagine one of these like knife strike things where I'm just like, you know what, I want to be around my kids. I want to be near my kids, and like earning millions of dollars is actually not that important. And also when you've realized that you've lived in a living space of about 3 or 4 square meters and have been happy and still eaten really well and still, watched TV and done all the things that you would do in a massive house, you don't need all that much crap. You don't need all, that much space. So the things that you work so hard to try and achieve, it's actually not all that important. You think that it is, and you've got career aspects and all these sorts of things. It's not as important as raising your kids, spending time with them, knowing that they want to play with you and that they, you're not a stranger to them 5 or 6 days a week. So that was really important to me, and it just sort of fell on me that I'm like, you know what, I need to start my own business. I need to do something where I can dictate my hours. I can work weekends if I want. I can work nights if I want, but I can still take my kids to swimming. I can still, help Matesse with, looking after them while she does shopping midweek. It was a change of lifestyle that I think made sense for us. Don't know whether it's going to work yet or not because I haven't exactly made any money. But you know what?
I was the opposite. I needed to get away from the kids.
Yeah, she needed to get back into work and some regularity of dealing with a work situation.
Oh yeah, your question: things that you brought that you didn't think you needed or that you didn't use. Capture. I never got to sit down.
I was going to say, really? Oh, no.
That's rubbish. It's rubbish.
He sat down a lot.
Well, on that note, guys, I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to put the link to your Instagram in the show notes. And Paul, do you have a link to your, have you got a website or something for your business? We can put it in there as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I do. I am setting it up. So it's in the build process at the moment, but it'll be up within the next couple of weeks or week and a half. So yeah, for sure.
So what is it?
It's easy.com.au. EEZI.com.au.
Awesome.
Software consulting.
Exciting. All right. Well, we'll check it out. And thanks so much. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
So, did you learn something from Matesse and Paul that will help you experience Australia on your own big lap? Leave a comment below letting us know, and as always, make sure you subscribe to get every video coming your way.